So with that, I want to invite Steve Kinsey up to the stage. Supervisor Steve Kinsey, who represents District 4. And Steve, these panels I know probably remind you of candidates forum. This is not a candidates forum, but if you want to get back involved, I think there are some people who would support that.
That's great. Thanks,
All right.
John.
Tell us what you're doing at the county.
Well, thank you. And I would like to start by thanking First Five for putting this together, but more importantly, for putting the conversation together over a long, long period of time. First Five has really been fundamental to organizing our understanding about the substantial benefits of investing in our youth. And it's culminating this year in an initiative that I believe the entire Board of Supervisors is going to support. We call it the Strong Starts campaign, and it's probably the most significant thing that we can all do together. So Strong Starts will be a quarter-cent sales tax on this November's ballot. It has a very high bar. We have to get 2/3 of our community to commit to taxing ourselves, to reaching into our own pockets to support several really important things. The most important being preschool. We all know, this room knows in particular, how critically important preschool education, child care wrapped around that, and the health of the children that are in our programs are to their life trajectory and to their ability to contribute and be active participants in our community overall. We will, upon our successful vote this November, become the first community in the state of California to have identified a dedicated revenue stream for our children. Now, there are programs in San Francisco, that's right. Programs in San Francisco that have been around for a long time that tap the general fund. But what is unique and different about our commitment will be that those dollars can't be touched for any other purpose. They can exclusively be used primarily for preschool education, and within that, a realization that just providing preschool isn't enough. It needs to be quality preschool. We need to have preschool workers and educators who are trained and given the support. And we need to be able to measure their success and their achievement and their progress. And the measure does provide for those elements as well. Child care is also very important, and health care is critically important. So the Strong Starts is really the pinnacle opportunity that all of us have to be a part of this year. And it's taken years and years. In fact, Amy and I were thinking about it, and it was probably almost 10 years ago. So while Julie talks about we have to have a sense of urgency, we also have to have a sense of patient determination to keep moving. And we began by looking to others who had done something like that. Dr. Lawrence came to us from Florida and said that in a community of lower middle class citizens in that state, they were able to find a dedicated funding stream to invest in their children. And that was the first spark of inspiration that's led us along this path that now is on the verge of becoming a measure. And it's a measure that we'll all face in part because all 5 county supervisors, and I see some of my colleagues, Supervisor Rice, who serves on the First 5 Commission, Supervisor Conley, I know that Supervisor Sears, Supervisor Arnold, all of us are committed to this measure, and that's extremely helpful, and I think it's a reflection of the board's leadership. But that isn't enough either. The folks who have driven this initiative have really been the partnership of all the community organizations as well as the Office of Education. 60% of the funds that come from this measure will be allocated through the Office of Education, but they will rely on advisory bodies that exist. So that's a big, important issue for all of us to be involved in because 2/3 is by no means guaranteed. It's going to take us actively working for that this November. The range of other things that we've been involved in, I've had, my district, the 4th District, remarkable district in Marin County. It stretches from the bay to the ocean. Includes 21 distinct communities, and it has the significant number of people of color in the canal and the workforce for our working ranches and farms out in West Marin. So early on, I recognized that for me to be able to be supportive, responsive, I needed to have someone who had the cultural capacity to do that. And I want to recognize David Escobar, aide in my office. He was the most polite guy to be able to point out what white privilege means. There we go. And we began working to reflect the recognition that all cultures have a place in our county, and to work with organizations from Grassroots Leadership Network, Canal Alliance, the Welcome Center. We watched it be born and now to be prospering. All of these organizations are partners in making the change that we have. But internally at the county, and since we're talking about government today a little bit, we began back in 2010 thinking about what we could do to make change happen. We sent a delegation to Detroit in 2011 to the Policy Link conference on equity. They came back, and the interesting thing about how things change over time is that the folks that went to that conference came back, and what they wanted at that point in time, their highest priority was to watchdog the county. And John, you were a part of that. And they wanted to make sure we were spending the dollars fairly. They wanted us to create advisory bodies. They wanted us to do a lot of things to make sure that the county was fulfilling its responsibilities. We've done some of that. We still need to do more. But over the ensuing years, we've continued to meet informally as what we called an equity action team, a handful of us, many of whom are here today, thinking about how to move the dial with the county. And I'd also would like to acknowledge that leadership comes in a variety of ways. And it certainly begins with the core values of those who have the authority, who have the vested power that's been created under a government structure. And our own county administrator, Matthew Heimel, who's here with us today, I think he deserves tremendous credit for recognizing. Thank you. Matthew helped us recognize how we take these deeply held values and this sense of inequity and unfairness and injustice and can convert them into the change that's needed to begin to dismantle the systems, as we talk about, implicit or explicit, that have created the unfairness that is apparent in all the different categories of our society and are especially apparent here in Marin County because while we're a very privileged community, we are also a very white community. And so it becomes even easier for us to think we do good things as individuals and not to recognize what we as institutions are imposing on others. And so with strong leadership from Matthew and with guidance from an equity action team, we've put together the first 5-year business plan that has as its number one program goal to create an inclusive organization, to recognize that we need to do the work internally in Marin County government and then take that leadership, that expression through action out to the larger community as well. We've done it with affinity groups where cultural identities of ethnic groups within the county workforce, African American, Latino, Indigenous, Asian Americans, each have their opportunity to have groups where they can have their own communication, their own celebrations of their culture, and then their own ideas about how they can contribute and where they want to move the dial. We did it with our business plan, committing our county government to our entire 2,000-plus person workforce taking a cultural competency training over the next 2 years, and we will achieve that goal. We did it by recognizing that one of the reasons our workforce doesn't reflect our community in terms of the demographics is that so often we don't have people of color on our hiring panels, and that there is that implicit bias right there by looking across a table at someone who is the same color of skin as oneself and not recognizing how to communicate. So we have made a commitment that every one of our hiring panels will include people of color, and we will also make a concerted effort to reach beyond that, earlier than that, to make sure that folks can see the opportunities that are present working in county government. So these are important things, and obviously, having just listened to Julie for a good period of time and recognizing the embedded experience and understanding that she brings, we committed our government to participating in the Government Alliance on Racial Equity for 13 months of active education, training, and engagement, and I think that also is going to be a tremendous boost to what we can do. So all of those things are important parts of what we do. We have 5 pilot projects, as we call them, which are intended to be expressions of further action. I want to note in particular the outstanding leadership and also the great partnership that our our librarian, head librarian, and the library system, Sarah Jones, have created. Sarah and her team are working with the Novato Unified School District to ensure that we hit the targets we want for kids by the time they're in 3rd grade, around 3rd grade reading, because that is a great indicator of their ability to be successful as they go forward in their educational pursuits. And that partnership is another expression of the idea that government has a role, but it doesn't have a full responsibility. And so by working in partnership, we can go further. Our Parks Department has a goal of increasing the diversity of its workforce and is working very hard on that. Equity in health is always important, and we have a health equity plan that we're implementing as well. And through our Community Development Agency, we're taking on this sort of long history of institutional bias that's been expressed historically in the most dramatic ways around the lack of civil rights and inclusion in our housing policies. And we're going to be tackling that around affirmatively furthering fair housing opportunities. I'm just going to say one other thing that, when we talk about communities like ours and implicit bias, so often we hear the word, we want safe communities, or we want to protect our community character. These are the ways in which messaging goes out, whether intentional or otherwise, that discourages breaking down the biases that have been built into the history. I mean, it's stunning to many of us, but it's sad and true that until the middle of the 1960s, we had deed restrictions on properties. We have redlining under financing through credit unions and banks that prevented people of color from living in many of the neighborhoods in Marin County. And if you think of the cumulative impact of 150 years of those kinds of segregationist activities that are just built in the normal course of the way business is done, you get the result that we have today, where on every indicator from health and education and job prosperity, life expectancy itself, we are not where we need to be. So our commitment as a government is to move the dial. I think, and in preparing for this, I told Julie earlier, it's somewhat intimidating to talk about race, and especially as a white man. And looking around the room, I should take advantage of mentioning I also have male privilege. To really come to terms, to acknowledge that much of what we take for granted as just our own skills, capability, have been created for us by generations of advantage that have been built into systems that we don't even think about. And I personally would just suggest to all of us here, and especially those of us who are white, and even more so those of us who are male, that we should stop for a moment and think about all the ways, and if you stop for just a little bit of time and think about all the ways that we have had advantages that haven't been available to people of color, that's the first step on the road to the goal that we have. Thank you.